Keep him busy. We are in a lot of trouble. When I was 10, I watched The Mummy for the first time in 2000. The scene where the mummy wakes up scared me so much that I jumped off the couch and grabbed to my mom. The creepy parts of the movie work really well, even though it's not a horror movie. Not just that scene, but also how Imhotep is presented as a monster that is hard to beat. Eating the bodies of the people who stole his jars to heal his body really made him feel scared for a long time. But what was really scary wasn't on the screen. The Mummy almost turned into a totally different movie. A bloody horror version directed by Clive Barker, where Leonardo DiCaprio could have been the main character. And a project that was almost hidden as a B-movie. They were only saved by an unexpected business move that came about because of the failure of a small talking pig. Brendan Fraser once told people behind-the-scenes facts about Patricia Velasquez that showed she wasn't even playing. And today we let you back into the world of The Mummy 1999 behind the scenes. The Mummy almost had a different face before Brendan Fraser grabbed a gun and went into the desert. Leonardo DiCaprio almost played the lead role. Universal saw Rick O'Connell as the heart of the movie. They saw him as an action hero like Indiana Jones, who was strong, funny, and flawed. Because of this, they got in touch with a lot of big-name stars, like Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, and Ben Affleck. Most of them either said no or couldn't make the time. Leonardo DiCaprio, who was at the height of his fame at the time after Titanic, was the only one who really seemed interested. It was DiCaprio's dream to play the part, but he had to star in The Beach first. He even asked the studio to put off making The Beach so he could work on The Mummy, but they said no, so he had to step away. In a strange twist, The Beach was later pushed back, which meant that DiCaprio could have played the Mummy after all if the choice had been more open-minded. Bruce Campbell got the part in the end. His physical energy and natural charm in George of the Jungle made Stephen Sommers and the directors decide to cast him. It turned out to be the right move. Fraser created a Rick O'Connell who was tough but still likable. So much so that it's hard to picture the Mummy today without him. 19. It wasn't CGI that the body had a gold covering. One of the most haunting scenes in The Mummy 1999 is when Anck-Sunamun stands naked during the live mummification ritual and her body slowly covers itself in shimmering gold as the torchlight flickers. It looks like the scene was made with only CGI, but it wasn't. Most of what people see on TV and movies was made with real-life effects. Real metallic paint was painted on the actress's body instead of computer graphics for the show. In the late 1990s, CGI wasn't quite advanced enough to make it look like metal was sticking to a person's skin in strong lighting. This is why director Stephen Sommers decided to be involved. It was a very painful procedure. It was very hot in the studio, and the actor had to stand still for hours while her makeup was applied. She also had to deal with the weight of thick paint on her skin. In exchange, the scene became very real, almost stifling. The gold did more than just look good, it was strong and present. That's what makes the mummification ceremony feel less like a magical show and more like a really gross punishment. 18. There was a time when Clive Barker worked on The Mummy. The Mummy almost turned into a much darker story before it turned into a dusty, fun journey. Universal Pictures gave the go-ahead for a modern version of The Mummy 1932 in the early 1990s. Producers James Jacks and Sean Daniel were in charge of the project. At first, they wanted to make a low-budget horror movie that would cost about $10 million. The director who was asked to lead it at the time was Clive Barker, who made Hellraiser and Candyman. Production records and later comments show that Barker wanted The Mummy to take place in the present day, in a museum run by a secret cult where old rituals were used to bring the mummy back to life. It was clear that the tone was definitely Barker. It was violent, sexual, and focused a lot on body horror with not much room for fun. Or funny. Although, as work on the project went on, Universal slowly tried to make it more approachable to a wider range of people. The two sides couldn't come to an understanding, and in the end, Barker quit the movie. That split sent The Mummy back to the beginning, but it also made room for the adventure-themed movie version that came later. At the same time, I wish Barker's idea of The Mummy had been turned into a movie. 17. Places used for filming. A real desert with real danger. It wasn't just that The Mummy looked mean on screen, it was actually filmed in very mean circumstances. The filming started in Morocco, and the main setting was the Sahara Desert. The real-life site of Deir Medour, a horseshoe-shaped volcano crater, was picked to stand in for Hamunaptra. You may have seen this scenery before, don't you think? The cast and crew had to work in very dry, hot conditions and were always at risk of becoming severely dehydrated. It was necessary for the medical staff to make a special hydrating solution that everyone had to drink every 2 hours. A lot of snakes, poisonous spiders, and scorpions showed up. Some team members were even taken to the hospital after getting bitten. That was on top of sandstorms that happened almost every day and messed up the shooting plan and destroyed sets. Not many people know that the production was also protected against kidnapping, which is a very important safety measure. Later, many indoor scenes were moved to Shepperton Studios in England, which is a safer place, to lower the risk. But in The Mummy, both the soul of the desert and the price paid for it were real. 16. The Mummy's music. When music opens a door to another time, you know you're about to go on a trip from the first notes. Jerry Goldsmith, who is one of the most famous names in Hollywood film music, wrote the music for The Mummy. And while this was Goldsmith at his most classic, it was also Goldsmith in his later years, wise, brave, and full of energy. He mixed themes from the Middle East and Egypt with traditional adventure music to make a sound that was strange, thrilling, and sometimes as triumphant as Indiana Jones. This masterpiece is even more impressive when you consider that Goldsmith wrote The Mummy while also scoring The Haunting, The 13th Warrior, and Hollow Man. Even so, this music is full of life. It was like he was telling people that adventure movies were still living. In 2004, just a few years after that, Jerry Goldsmith died. Many people think of The Mummy as one of his last truly great themes, a brilliant farewell. 15. The different beginning. Do you remember? In the first scene of The Mummy, we see a flashback to ancient Egypt, where we learn about Imhotep's illegal relationship with Ankh-Senamun, the pharaoh's wife. This relationship leads to Imhotep's mummification. But the start was supposed to be a little different at first. At first, the filmmakers thought of it as a straight homage to the original movie from 1932. The universal mark was supposed to look like it came from the 1930s and then fade away into the hot desert sun. At that point, Arnold Vosloo read a story that was written just for Imhotep. Stephen Sommers quickly saw, though, that there was a major problem. There is no way that Imhotep could have opened the movie with English speech because he only spoke ancient Egyptian. So, Ardith Bey, played by Odette Fair, was given the role of narrator again. This was a better choice because it made the story flow better and seemed more real. 14. There was an animated show based on The Mummy because of how well it did in theaters. Together with 2 sequels and the spin-off, The Scorpion King, Universal brought the world of the movie into animation with a TV show. Universal Cartoon Studios made an animated show called The Mummy. It had 2 seasons and played from 2001 to 2003. Even though many people didn't know it existed until much later. The show follows the O'Connell family on adventures all over the world, where they keep running into Imhotep and other mysterious dangers. Due to licensing issues, the characters' voices and looks did not closely match their live-action counterparts, which made them seem less familiar. The story itself, though, was pretty bold. With plots that had many levels and were sometimes more complicated than what was usual for children's animation. Even though not everyone has fond memories of the show, it is still an interesting part of The Mummy's longer past, especially for fans who want to learn more about the whole franchise. 13. On the set of The Mummy, Brendan Fraser almost died. You may remember the scene where Rick O'Connell is hanged in the town square with his feet hanging off while Evelyn tries very hard to get his life back. It looks like a tense adventure scene on the screen. It almost turned into a real tragedy behind the scenes. Brendan Fraser was left hanging for longer than it was safe to be while the scene was being filmed. Even though there were safety ropes around him, his body was so tight that he couldn't breathe. Fraser passed out on set, and the crew had to wake him up. Later, Rachel Weisz said that the moment was really scary because no one noticed right away that things had gone too far. Interestingly, Michael J. Fox had a nearly identical event happen to him years ago while filming Back to the Future Part 3. It's clear that even practicing hanging is very dangerous. Even after the accident, Fraser finished the movie with the same energy, charm, and sense of adventure that made Rick O'Connell famous. Maybe it's that risk that makes The Mummy seem real dangerous, both in front of and behind the camera. In 2012, The Mummy was almost just a cheap B-movie. Universal didn't think of The Mummy as a big project in the beginning. The original plan was for a $15 million adventure horror movie to be made quickly and release in theaters. After that, nothing was planned. Everything changed when Babe Pig failed in the city for no reason. That movie did badly at the box office, which led to a change in management at Universal. The new leaders wanted to show how strong they were by taking a risk. They needed a real hit, and all of a sudden, The Mummy was picked. The budget went up a lot, to about $80 million, and the production got bigger with bigger sets, more visual effects, and a lot more vision. Mummy went from being a project that was almost dead to being a big risk for the studio and one of the biggest hits of the late 1990s. 11. Before Rachel Weisz became linked to the image of Evelyn Carnahan Universal, they thought about a few other choices. Jen Lopez, who had just made a big splash with Selena and Out of Sight, and Ashley Judd, who had just gotten a big break with Kiss the Girls, were both on the list. There was something missing from each star power. Evelyn had to be smart, deeply interested in learning, and believable while also being easily hurt. Someone who could knock over a whole library shelf of books but would still stand her ground in front of a mummy that had come back to life. Then Rachel Weisz showed up. At the time, she had only been in a few small parts and wasn't well known. Still, Weisz gave Stephen Sommers exactly what he was looking for in her interview. She had a sharp mind, eyes that were full of wonder, and a weakness that never made her feel weak. The part changed the course of her career right away. After the fact, Weisz said she had no idea how big The Mummy would get, all she knew was that the movie gave her the part that changed everything. The other names came and went as quickly as sand in the desert, and in the heat and dust of Egypt, a new star was born. 10. It wasn't just playing to become Imhotep. Do you remember the first time you saw Imhotep? His eyes were burning in the dark, and every step he took seemed to carry 1,000 years of curses with it. It wasn't just the visual effects that made Arnold Vosloo feel cold, it started with his body. Vosloo had to go through a makeup process that was almost like pain in order to become Imhotep. The practical effects team put on layers of latex paint and prosthetics on him for hours before CGI took over shooting. He could barely move because his whole body was shut up so tightly. His face was burned at the end of each day of shooting. There was blood in his eyes and his face was swollen. Later, Vosloo said that the deep marks that were left on his skin when the makeup was taken off shocked him, making him feel like Imhotep's curse had come true. It was clear that there was irony. He was playing a character who was buried alive and punished until they died, but the makeup made him hate that kind of pain. Vosloo was already made to look like a mummy before CGI brought Imhotep back to life on screen. 9. Real fire, real shells, and real wood falling apart made the whole thing look like an old trick. Do you remember the scene where the characters are scared as scarabs swarm across the stone floor and crawl over them? Not all of that scary feeling came from computers. People often think of The Mummy as a show with a lot of CGI effects, but it actually had a lot of real effects as well. Interviews with Stephen Sommers and the effects team say that many of the scarab shots were made with real models and mechanical puppets that were attached directly to stunt actors to make it look like something was crawling on their skin. Also, the blasts were not green screen effects. Real fireworks were set off in the Moroccan desert, just a few meters away from the players. The walls of Hamunaptra that were falling apart were built up to full size and then lowered, sending dust and other things flying across the set. As well as the camera lenses. That's why the movie seems risky now. People aren't just seeing chaos, they're seeing real things snap, crack, and burn right in front of their eyes. 8. Put to the test by fire with real people before it came out. The Mummy had several tests showing in the US before it came out in theaters. Universal took this very seriously because they had already spent a lot of money on the project. In later interviews, producer Sean Daniels said that early audience opinions were pretty split. Some people who saw the movie thought it was too much fun and not scary enough for a monster movie. Stephen Sommers didn't go back and make the movie darker, but he did make it flow better. Some funny parts were cut down, and some scary parts were tightened up so that the adventure would keep going without stopping. More importantly, he worked on making Rick and Evelyn's connection clearer and stronger. Because test screenings showed that people felt most connected to these two figures. The end result was a dramatic cut that was just scary enough to build tension while also being light enough to be fun. The tests didn't make the Mummy safer, instead, they helped it find its beat. 7th, the filming schedule was planned to look like a military operation. Filming for The Mummy did not go according to the usual, laid-back Hollywood plan. The group had to constantly move between sound stages in England and the Moroccan desert, according to director Stephen Sommers and producer James Jacks. The schedule was set up in a way that was similar to a military operation. Every day when they shot outside, they had a very small window of time. To protect both the cast and the tools, they stay out of the hottest hours. Action scenes with lots of people were filmed early on, when the actors were still physically able to handle the harsh circumstances. Scenes with a lot of dialogue and indoor shots were saved for later stages at Shepperton Studios, where things were much easier to control. Some people have said that the film could have been weeks behind schedule just because of bad weather if it wasn't so well organized. On screen, The Mummy may look like an unplanned adventure, but behind the scenes, it was planned out to the hour. One of the most important reasons the movie came out on time and was a huge hit. 6. The part Patricia Velasquez played as Aang Sunamoon showed a lot. When Aang Sunamoon walks through the ritual room at night, do you remember how the light from the torch shines on the black and gold patterns on her skin just before death and the curse fall? The scene was mostly filmed in real life, and it's both sensual and scary. In the usual sense, Patricia Velasquez's costume didn't have much clothes in it. A loincloth, a few pieces of jewelry, and other simple clothes were the only things that covered her body. The makeup artists painted black and gold designs on her skin by hand, line by line, every morning for about 4 hours. Under the studio lights, her body looked like a live suit of armor. Velasquez had to stay almost still, he couldn't lean, move quickly, or sweat because even a small smudge could ruin the image. One of the most memorable pictures in a movie full of mummies, scarabs, and temples that are falling down was made with paint, light, and a lot of patience. 5. A weakness turned into a tool. Universal wasn't at all sure that The Mummy would do well when it came out in 1999. Many directors saw this as just another remake of a monster movie, an attempt to bring back the huge shadow of Boris Karloff. The test screenings made them even more worried. Feedback used words like too much and over the top silly a lot. Some people thought the movie would not do well at all and that the studio's $80 million would be lost like sand in the desert. Everything changed, though, when people went into the movies. They laughed at the idle chatter, loved the fast-paced adventure story, and liked the tone that reviewers had criticized. Something that was seen as a weakness turned out to be a strength. Universal was ready for a rough fall. Critics were waiting for something big to go wrong. They didn't expect that people would see a kind of magic they hadn't seen before, and that the mummy was actually alive because of the extra label. 4. Stephen Sommers refused to do what Universal wanted. At first, Universal didn't hire Stephen Sommers to make a fun action movie. They wanted a remake that was strongly rooted in horror, dark, serious, and bloody, more like old monster movies than light entertainment. To put it simply, they wanted people to be scared, not pleased. Sommers had a different opinion. He saw The Mummy as a romantic adventure that mixed the spirit of Indiana Jones with Errol Flynn's swashbuckling charm. The movie needed action, romance, funny lines, and a broken but likable main character. The company was worried about this idea. They were afraid that a more fun tone would hurt a well-known monster brand. The budget was questioned over and over, and Sommers was asked to make it darker because of disagreements. He didn't give up. When the movie came out, that decision turned out to be the right one. The Mummy went from being a risky remake to a beloved hit thanks to Brendan Fraser's funny performance, Rachel Weisz's beauty, and the movie's upbeat sense of adventure. Universal wanted to scare people, but some has brought fun, and that's exactly what has helped the movie last. 3. The desert not only hurt them with its heat and sandstorms, but it also made them sick. Do you remember the scenes where the group walked through Hamunaptra, their faces pale from the heat of the desert? Being that tired wasn't acting in real life. Almost everyone who worked on The Mummy got food poisoning while they were shooting in Morocco. Later interviews with Stephen Sommers and several team members said that filming had to be stopped because actors kept getting sick and having to run to medical tents or toilets in the middle of the desert. Both Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz said that almost everyone got hit, from the actors to the tech team. Except for Arnold Vosloo, who was a strange case. He wouldn't eat local food and only ate meals that were made for him. So, while the rest of the team had stomachaches and was thirsty, Vosloo stayed healthy and moved around the set calmly. In a strange twist, the actor who played the cursed mummy was the only real person who had not been affected by the desert's curse. 2. Evelyn Carnahan's funniest scene almost became her most dangerous. One of Evelyn Carnahan's funniest scenes almost turned into a really bad accident. On screen, the scene where she knocks over the library shelves looks fun and silly, but in real life, more than 2,000 real books were put on tall wooden shelves that were designed to fall one after the other like dominoes. The store would be destroyed if even one shelf didn't fall at the right time. It could take days to rebuild the setup. Rachel Weisz demanded that she have to act out the scene. There will be no act doubles or tricks. Things became much more dangerous after that choice. Because they were made of real wood and metal, the shelves could have fallen on her if she was even a tiny bit late or early. When the cameras went off, the whole set went dead. The shelf was pushed by Weiss at just the right time. It was a perfect chain reaction. Just in time, she moved out of the way. On screen, it turned into a laugh. Behind the camera, there wasn't much room to move. 1. Arnold Vosloo really is an ancient Egyptian when he curses. It's not made up language when Arnold Vosloo swears, threatens, or yells on screen. It really is Egyptian from long ago. Stephen Sommers wanted to be as real as possible, so he brought in scholars to translate all of Imhotep's conversation into words that hadn't been spoken in a very long time. Every curse, every right line, and every prayer to the gods was based on real events. Vosloo people had to spend hours with heavy makeup, hot lights, and learning how to say sounds they didn't know. They also had to practice the rhythm and structure of a language that wasn't spoken anymore. The work wasn't for nothing. The lines of Imhotep have a different weight to them, they are cold, old, and clear. People in the audience get chills even if they don't understand a word. But for Egyptologists, it's a real language put back together from bits and pieces of history. It's funny that this Imhotep isn't trying to talk to the dead. His words are in their own language. What about you? What is your favorite scene from The Mummy, 1999? Write something. If you want to see more deleted scenes from the golden age of Hollywood movies, don't forget to like, follow, and turn on the bell. There are things Hollywood has kept from you for decades that will surprise you.